My cousin would always tell us a creepy story that happened to him when he was 9. Monday 2009, my cousin, let's call him Jason, a smart 9-year-old who would play on his PS2 every day when he comes from school. On Monday 2009, he received an iPhone. The next day, he took it to school to show it off to his classmates. One day, while he was texting one of his friends, he received a message from an unknown number. The text was 666, and it had a really creepy image of what looked like a demon. He thought it was some troll messing with him, so he ignored it. But the next day at night, he received the same message and picture. He was freaked out. A few minutes later, the same unknown number called him. All he could hear was someone whispering an address. My cousin blocked the unknown number. A month later, he saw on the news a boy who was brutally murdered in the same address the unknown number was talking about. He thanked God for giving him a bad feeling and not going to that weird address, because if he went, he'd become dead like the dead boy. We are all chasing for more freedom, and I mean every living being, big or small, is constantly looking to escape. Humanity has come a long way with the amount of freedom and rights that people have. A couple of years ago, slavery was the norm, and people were divided by the colour of their skin. Gender equality has come a long way as well, because it wasn't so long ago that women were restricted to being only mothers. So many famous male and female activists have fought for freedom for all human beings and are now being looked up to as heroes. Anything can be a prison though, and it could be a job you hate or being stuck in a relationship that is going nowhere. The need to be free from those types of prisons are just as strong as any other yearning for escape. Something always comes to trap us, and the fight to escape entrapments, however big or small, is the curse for being alive. People addicted to drugs used drugs to help them escape from one hellish lifestyle, only to be reliant on their drug to the point that it becomes their new prison. They traded in one prison for another. The way addicts escape addiction is through rehab and the use of other medicines as their ticket to freedom. The need to get out of things is in all of us, but with so many rights protecting us and the freedom to love, travel and choose whatever takes our fancy, I must ask the question as to why people are so miserable, considering everything that we have and the privileges our era has given us. Unlike in past eras, we sappy group of people living in the best of times, depression is prevalent throughout the globe, and suicide is common, even though anyone from the past would think we are living in the golden age of human civilization. I always used to think that maybe we are all ungrateful, but then opinions always change, like the seasons throughout the year. My daughter was looking for freedom, and she has always been depressed. Ever since she was a little tiny girl, she hated hanging around with other kids and was a very reserved child. The other girls naturally took to picking on her because my daughter was so different and it was obvious that the kids her age would not take to her so easily. I have had to change her school multiple times now. Now I have found a school where she can be herself. It's strange how children bully each other, as if they do not realise that what they say and do to each other has real effects on the other human. I guess maturing takes time. I tried to show my daughter the different types of hobbies she could get into, but she just doesn't seem to like anything, and everything just depresses her. I have spent quite a bit of money trying to get the best psychologist to deal with my daughter, but in the end, medication is all that we are given. I dreamt that one day my daughter would play with other girls and enjoy all of the things that life has given us. Then one day I awoke to my daughter laughing and chatting to someone outside our house, and as I looked outside, I couldn't believe that my daughter was socializing with someone. It was a woman I had never seen before, but my daughter seemed to connect with her somehow, and I was just so happy for her. When I tried to introduce myself to the woman talking with my daughter, she just simply walked away. My daughter had a smile on her face like she felt relieved, and I asked her about the woman she was talking to, but my daughter just smiled and said, "Just a generous woman." Just like that, I started seeing my daughter hanging about with this woman. I didn't try and intervene because for the first time my daughter looked so comfortable in her own skin. At the same time, an adult woman hanging around my daughter of high school age did always concern me. My daughter was smiling though, and I guess I had intentions of inviting this woman over to my house to try to get to know her. I mean, I have tried many specialists to get through to my daughter, and I wanted to know how she did it. My wife was a little jealous and felt like she was a failure because she couldn't connect with her daughter. When my daughter went to school, she didn't want a lift. I received a knock on the door. There were two smartly dressed guys who were from the British Secret Services, and they had something serious to tell me. They showed pictures of the woman who my daughter had taken a liking to, and told me that this woman had died in World War II. They showed us her documents and everything about her life and where she was buried, and the obvious questions were asked, but the answers were not simple to understand. "It's not the dead or anything supernatural," the first guy told me. "Do you believe in aliens?" the other one asked. "Aliens?" I replied. "We are not so sure how they came to our planet, but these aliens travel and feed off freedom. Our race is freer than ever before, and so these aliens can travel and feed so more than they could before," the first guy told me. "They use dead people as well to move around, as dead people are considered by them to be free," the second guy told me. I couldn't believe any of this, and I told them to go away, even when they showed me proof that they did truly work in the National Secret Service. I couldn't take any more of it. They gave me their card, and I was told to call them if anything started to escalate. As soon as my daughter came home, I banned her from ever seeing that strange woman ever again. My daughter started to cry and moan that it wasn't fair and that she really liked the woman. When I followed her into her bedroom crying and wailing, we were both in shock when that strange woman was suddenly in her room. My daughter screamed in terror, and I was just trying to catch my breath out of sheer shock that the woman who my daughter knew now looked like a hideous creature. The woman held out her arm towards my daughter, and even though she was talking softly, it echoed throughout the house. Do you want to be free from all of this, Julia? Come with us, and we will give you the ultimate freedom, the woman told my daughter. I then noticed that my daughter seemed to be in some kind of trance. Her smile was weak, and I grabbed hold of her to stop her from moving into the creature's arms. All my daughter could say was, I want to be free from all of this and everything else. Then, by some miracle, the two guys from the Secret Services had been keeping an eye on our family, and they rushed into my house. As they entered the room, all three of us dragged my daughter from her bedroom. I locked my daughter's bedroom with the thing still trapped inside. As I did this, my daughter was in the living room. She was back to being shocked and scared. I finally believed the two Secret Service guys, and they explained more to me about the odd aliens from outer space. They said to me, these aliens don't just travel and feed off freedom, but they are made of it. This also answered my question as to why depression and suicide is so prevalent in the golden era of having such high levels of freedom and rights. Depression is just one of the effects caused by the aliens who chase after freedom and make us kill ourselves, because they cause so much emotional and psychological pain that their victim only wants to be free from it all. I wanted to take my daughter to the hospital, but the two Secret Service guys told me that the hospital wouldn't help. They warned me that there is only one thing that I could do. They told me that because the aliens feed off freedom and can't travel through freedom, I had to start reducing my daughter's freedoms. They explained that even some of her rights as a human being would have to be limited. That way, it would be hard for the aliens to get to her. The two Secret Service guys spoke to their manager. As they explained this to me, they started to shuffle some paperwork and explain to me that my daughter had to start doing hard labour for no money. She would be prevented from going out or eating something when she felt like it. I went along with it because all I wanted was for my daughter to be safe. My wife was utterly distraught about the whole thing, and she couldn't stop thinking about my daughter's future. She was concerned about what my daughter could do if her rights and freedoms are limited. We were told that some people do survive, but some don't. We were warned that the aliens are always trying to find ways to get to their victim. I had to take my daughter out of school and make her sleep down in the cellar and lock the cellar door. All of this made it look like our daughter was a slave. However, it did work, as the woman in our bedroom had disappeared. I would sometimes see the woman either in the market or some other place outside the home. Either way, she was far away from my family. At a later date, I had to force my daughter to go to work in a meat factory, where the owner was working for the Secret Services. The department in charge of the meat factory is a special secret government service department which deals with aliens and other creatures alike. The department have made all sorts of factories as a way of rehabilitation for people like my daughter whose freedom and rights had to be taken away due to the aliens. It was horrible, and listening to her cry, it also wasn't nice to smell her after a hard day's work. My daughter begged me to give her life back, but I couldn't, as I knew what would happen to her if I did. All of my daughter's basic rights and freedom now taken away, but she was safe for a while, which only lasted for a couple of months. One day I heard my daughter screaming down in the cellar. As I rushed down, I saw that my daughter was in front of that woman again, and she was trying to tempt my daughter into taking freedom. I saw my daughter going back into a trance again, and her smile was so weak and feeble I felt like she was drugged or something. I ran down the stairs and dragged my daughter away from the alien. As I did, it gave out a screech, and a couple of more Secret Service guys came to our rescue. Our house was being watched 24/7 at that point, and I locked the cellar door. After the door was locked, I looked in confusion at the two men who ordered me to take away my daughter's freedom and rights. I was confused because their plan hadn't worked as they'd promised. Then one of them looked at me with a serious, worried look and said, "We have to go deeper and take more rights from your daughter. This time we will take her ability to choose who she can have sex with." I practically puked when I heard that, and I shouted, "You want to take away the freedom of choice of who my daughter gets to have sex with? She is still at school." "We may not have a choice here, and the alien still managed to get to your daughter because she still had some freedom left, which was sexual freedom. I didn't think we would have to go that far, but this creature is determined to get to your daughter," the second Secret Service man told me. Although it sounded disgusting, they had a point. However, I wasn't going to let my daughter become some sex slave, and nor was my wife prepared to see our daughter become a sex slave. Both my wife and I decided to give our daughter away to the creature down in the cellar. As I held my daughter in my arms with my wife behind me crying her eyes out, I looked at the alien, and it looked at my daughter. My daughter smiled again. I loved seeing her smile like that. I realized then that I couldn't bear seeing her as some slave anymore. My daughter said to the alien, "I want freedom. I want to escape." And the alien touched my daughter, and she died in my arms. The alien looked at me and said, "Your daughter is now free from everything that has caused her so much agony." The next couple of years were hard. The relationship between my wife and me was not the same anymore, as we would both constantly argue and blame each other. It was not until recently we both saw our daughter again. We would see her in random places, which brought hope to us both. And one day she appeared in our house, and my wife and I were overjoyed. Our daughter was now offering me and my wife freedom. She is offering us freedom from the pain that life can give to parents whose child has died. Both of us know what we want. My wife was the willing participant, and now I have to try and to protect her from the same fate my daughter had experienced. Mike was a host of a very popular nighttime chat show called The Nightline. He had a lot of controversial topics discussed and strange callers. But one night in November, he had the most controversial call ever, which he could have never guessed before taking it, that it would change his whole life. He was chatting about marriages and couples divorcing, etc. One caller who called himself Kevin rang just a few minutes before the show was about to end and was speaking about his wife arguing with him over and over, and he asked Mike for advice on what he should do. Mike was put on the spot, especially as it was so near the end of the show, but he decided to go with telling the caller to go with his instincts. Mike meant if he felt like getting separated or divorced, then go with his instincts. But as soon as Mike said it, a few seconds later, there was a loud sound of a gunshot in the distance. A few seconds later, there were police sirens. A gunshot in this city at night would cause a scene, so he knew it was definitely a gunshot after he heard the sirens. The thought crossed his mind, could it be Kevin the caller shot his wife when he had told him to trust his instincts? Was he some sort of lunatic who took his words for gospel and trusted his instincts even though it was to kill his wife in cold blood? He hoped that wasn't the case. A few minutes later, Mike exited the building, and there was a man that seemed to be soaked standing outside, as if he was waiting for someone. The man asked Mike for a light. Mike took out his light and offered it to the man, but the man said, "Could you light it, please? I've a problem at the moment with my arm." Mike said, "Sure," and lit the man's cigarette. Suddenly Mike jumped back as the man burst into flames and said, "My name is Kevin." He looked into Mike's eyes as he was burning to death right in front of him. Mike was stunned, shocked, knowing that it had to be Kevin, the caller, who had just called him a few minutes ago. Within seconds, a police siren was heard, and they pulled up to Mike and the burning man. A cop jumped out and held the gun at Mike and shouted, "Stop! You're under arrest. Put your hands in the air where I can see them. You have the right to remain silent." The cop's voice was tuned out after that, as Mike was in a daze, knowing he was being arrested for the man's murder, and blamed himself for the man murdering his wife. An ordinary day with my friends hanging out, riding bikes around the block and far away from home. Something caught our attention. An abandoned house. Completely abandoned and damaged. What caught my attention was the really bad smell that the house has. I planned with my friends to visit the house at midnight to finally find out what's the bad smell. It was finally midnight. I had already packed my supplies needed for this mission. I had a notebook so I can write notes based on what we see. When we arrived to the house had the door open. I thought it was weird, considering the fact that it was shut when we were riding the bikes around the house. Once we entered, the smell got worse. It came from the kitchen. I had a pocket knife for self-protection. We went to the kitchen and our eyes opened wide when we realized there was a cannibalistic restaurant. I hid in the closet with my friends. I started to write notes about it. Once the people in that restaurant were gone, we took off. We called the police once we got home. They arrived a little bit late, yet they found a dead body outside our house, with a note that said, and a picture of us taking off. The police station received a distressful call from a man who claimed that he lived with a murderer. He had to look at the murderer's face every single day. I was asked to go to his flat and talk with him. I have to admit though, he sounded off. When I went up to his flat, he was completely alone, and I wanted to ask questions about his flatmate, who he has accused of being a murderer. "Where is the murderer?" I asked him. The man went up to a mirror and pointed at his own reflection. "There he is," he proudly proclaimed. My name is Simon. It was a Friday night and I was really looking forward to tonight's game. I'm a quarterback in my local high school football team and my girlfriend is on the cheer team. There was a lot of stress this week between my girlfriend and another member of the team, Sarah, but thankfully all their trouble has been sorted out. My girlfriend Louise can be very high-strung at times. I hadn't seen my girlfriend since yesterday. I got into a huge fight with a guy, and when it was over, I just saw my girlfriend cry and run away. There must be something wrong with her phone, because when I tried to call, all I got was static. I was cheating on my girlfriend with Sarah, but my girlfriend never approached me about it, so I wasn't certain that's why they were fighting. And I know my girlfriend, and she would definitely approach me. It was time to kick off, and I was hyped up. We were playing our rival school, Moontown High School. Our team, Lime Street High School, were on top of their game this season, thankfully. But tonight's game was very important. The game started off very rough indeed. There were guys kept running for me and it was like they were targeting me. To make matters worse, I had butterfingers because the ball just fell out of my hands once I caught it. These guys seemed to really have it in for me. I was exhausted at half time, and when I walked into the dressing room, everyone ignored me. I didn't know what was happening. Suddenly I went out on the field and waved at my girlfriend, and she was ignoring me also and just started cheering with the rest of her team. It was after the game I felt like I was having a nightmare when my teacher got up to speak to everyone. Okay everyone, it was a decision made by the school council that we play this game in memory of Simon, and even though we were on the edge of calling it off, we decided to play the game in Simon's memory. He was such a great student and great player. I tuned the sound of my teacher out, as now I remembered getting hit by a yellow school bus, running across the road to my girlfriend, so excited to see she was talking to Louise. I tried for weeks to get them to be friends again, and when I finally did, I got hit by a school bus. But it was then I remembered a few weeks ago we were messing with a new kid in school who was into witchcraft and said if we wanted something to happen, we needed to sacrifice something we love. I then realised I made a pact with the new student to my girlfriend and Sarah be friends again. Then I walked up to my girlfriend and Sarah speaking. I couldn't believe what I heard my girlfriend say. I swear, I was so angry at him cheating with you, I didn't even realise I was going to push him in front of a bus. I didn't even see it coming. What if there was CCTV? I was wondering why I didn't remember her pushing me. Then the student from my school walked up to me and said, "Don't worry, this was all mapped out for you. Don't you see? I died too, but came back to life." I was shocked, wondering what he meant. Then suddenly I could hear voices and see lights. When my vision came around, I noticed there were doctors standing over me. He said, "Welcome back, kid. you're a fighter." My girlfriend came in a couple of minutes later with Sarah. My girlfriend started crying and took my hand. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I replied, "It's okay." I told my girlfriend a few weeks later, when I recovered, about my memories of playing the game. She said there was no game, it was called off. The strange guy from school kept telling me that he was messing about coming back to life. But after researching him online, I learned that he was brought back to life after being clinically dead after drowning. He was hailed as a miracle boy. The drowning happened a year ago. When I approached him about it, he told me it would be better to forget the whole thing, because when he decided to tell people about the sacrifice, etc., they just thought he was crazy. The boy looked confused. Then I got a phone call from my mum telling me that my girlfriend was hit by a truck. I had then realised why the boy looked confused. Then he looked shocked. He said, more than likely she hadn't known what the sacrifice would be. I got angry with the boy and shouted, "What do you mean?" Then my girlfriend walked up to me. She hadn't realised she had been killed. The boy said, "You can see dead people. That's the thing about this." My girlfriend smiled and said, "What's wrong?" I had then realised the reason I came back to life was because my girlfriend wished for me to get better, not knowing that she would sacrifice herself. We moved to a new home. Our home went through a home invasion many times. So much we had to move. As I was packing my stuff, I called my friends to see if they can help me with the moving. They agreed. We carried boxes and boxes to the truck. It was already night. Exhausted, we agreed for a sleepover. As it was 5:08 a.m, I was awake, but I wasn't tired at all. The next day we went to the basement to carry more boxes and old stuff. What caught my attention was an old flip phone. I picked it up and went to my room with my friends to check it out. The flip phone belongs to a crackhead who lived in our basement. I went to investigate as soon as I read the messages. Then I heard a voice saying, "You found me. Congrats." I ran so fast, I told my parents and we called the police. Later, the man was found. His intentions were to murder my family. My name is Rachel. Me and my boyfriend Alan were having a Valentine's dinner date. But it wasn't an ordinary Valentine's dinner date, because my boyfriend Alan was married. We had arguments over and over for the last 2 months since we met. Alan promised me he would do something about it, and I gave him an ultimatum. Either sort it out by Valentine's, or I can't keep going on being his mistress. We were enjoying our meal and drinking wine. It started out your usual romantic meal, but then things started getting a bit tense when I asked him, did he end things with his wife? Alan said to me, "Look, I know things have been all over the place, and I am not going to string you along any longer, trust me. But there was a time I loved my wife very much, but that love is gone long ago. You are the only person I love now. But saying that, because of me loving my wife so much before, I feel guilty just telling her outright it's over. I was angry. So you're telling me after promising me you'd sort it out by Valentine's night, you still didn't sort it out? Before he could say anything else, I said, I'm getting more wine. When I opened the fridge, I nearly got sick when I saw Alan's dead wife inside the fridge, and half of her body was gone. There was a laptop open on the table with a How to Cook Humans guide showing. I found it hard to walk back into the kitchen with the fear running through my body. I went back and shouted at him, What the hell is your wife doing in the fridge? Did you just feed me your dead wife? Is that your idea of sorting it out once and for all? Alan looked shocked and said, What are you talking about? A few minutes later, after Alan came around from the shock of seeing his dead wife, he rang the chef he had cooked the dinner. When he rang, there was a ringtone coming from the basement. A few seconds later, the chef came into the dining room. Jake, the chef, holds a gun up to Alan and said, Well, Alan, I'm glad you took the bait in the bar a few months back when I became very friendly with you and you spilled the beans on your affair. The affair with my wife, may I add. I also loved how you liked my idea of me cooking yourself and your mistress's meal, but little did you know that I'd cook your wife. Rachel looked in a daze, shocked at what she was hearing. Alan started crying. What the hell did you kill my wife for, you sick bastard? The chef smiled and pointed at me saying, Because you were having an affair with my dishonest bitch of a wife, that's why. I had never told Alan I was married and had never realised my husband knew I was having an affair. Please, Jake, stop this madness. That poor lady did nothing wrong to you. Why are you doing this? He said, Because he took you from me, so I took his wife. It just dawned on me now that I was just after eating the woman's body. Suddenly, Jake shot Alan dead, and then he shot and killed me. You might wonder why I'm able to tell you this story when my husband killed me. The answer is nothing. What you think you know about this story is true. There was no body in the fridge. There was no mad, angry husband or mistress. There was just me and my hallucinations. My dissociative disorder. I should not be in prison. It is not me who killed my wife. It is those people inside me. Maybe I will be out next Halloween. Maybe I will be out next Christmas. Maybe I will be out next Easter. Maybe I will be out for Valentine's Day next year. And then maybe I will have a romantic meal like I should have had this year. I wouldn't hurt anyone. Why can't they understand that? I was attending my church as always on Sunday, and we just had a small congregation, so there was 6 of us there, besides the pastor. It started just like usual. The pastor thanked us all for attending. Hello everyone, and welcome to this place of worship. And it's not important just to us be here today in church, but what is important is that we are in the presence of Jesus Christ, and we are all sinners, but we know that Jesus has died on the cross for our sins. We not only thank Jesus for putting us first, but we have to give Jesus all our love, as we are not worthy of his love, but he still loves us. This church might be a small church, but I have great news. I got a call from a big church in Florida. You might have heard of Pastor Duke. Well, good old Pastor Duke has invited us all to travel to his church in 2 weeks. He has our transport sorted out. His friend Henry will be collecting us all on his private plane. I am very excited about this, and we will be staying for 2 days. Please let me know if you are going to be travelling, and I will put your name down. Also, please don't invite anyone else, because it is just the regular churchgoers are invited. Well, I hope you are all as happy with the news as I am, and as I said, please let me know if you are interested in travelling. Whispers went around the church that day, and every one of us put our name down. In 2 weeks' time, we were flying on our way to Florida. We were so happy, looking forward to meet Pastor Duke. Suddenly, the mood of the journey changed for the worst when the plane seemed to experience terrible turbulence. Then it got worse, and everyone started screaming as the plane was dipping straight to the ground. Then, I'm not sure how long later, the plane was in flames, and I was lying on the grass next to it. I wondered how I could have escaped the crash, knowing no one should have been able to escape the plane crash as it was in bits and on fire. Then, suddenly, to my surprise and great relief, I saw the others lying on the grass behind me. We seemed to be in the most beautiful island. I couldn't believe any of us had survived the plane crash. Suddenly, there were people walk towards us, dressed in all white, and I was wondering, was I actually dead and in heaven? Then one of them spoke. "Welcome, everyone. Ye might be wondering where ye exactly are and what has actually happened. First, let me try to explain. Yes, ye should be dead right now, but the reality is ye are not. Ye all are alive due to a miracle, and well, there is no logical explanation that ye survived, only that the miracle of God has wanted ye to. Jesus has wanted ye to survive. Ye are in the Garden of Eden. Yes, historians have wondered for years and years exactly where was the Garden of Eden. But God has chosen ye to be here right now because ye have surrendered yourselves by putting God first, always, and He has given people the change of horror and torment and the blasphemy of what is experienced in the world. Ye have the change of eternal life. I was stunned and wondered, was I dreaming? We were hours speaking to the people dressed in white, trying to make sense of it. That night everything fell into place by what I overheard. I was behind a tree when I spotted 2 of the people in white speaking. This has gone perfectly. I wasn't sure would it work, but the gas that was left out into the plane to put them to sleep besides who was in the cockpit, it worked perfectly. It put them straight to sleep enough for us to land the plane safely and move them next to the plane after we had destroyed it. They are certain they were in that plane crash, which of course there was none. The other person said, "What are we going to do now? Don't you see? This is what the Eden brothers and sisters do. We will sacrifice them right here in this sacred ground, and we will have the Holy Spirit inside us and the gift of eternal life in the Garden of Eden." I froze in fear and waited for them to go. I had checked my phone signal earlier. There was no phone signal where we were. I wondered what could I do, so I decided to tell the others. Then we just ran and ran as fast as we could, hoping we could find someone to call help. Finally we reached someone who had a phone signal, and they rang the police. but they just laughed at us, asking us what were we on. It was when I got back in the church next Sunday was when everything came back crashing down around me. Pastor Duke, who had invited us, was behind the pew. Suddenly the doors locked behind us and he put up his hands and pointed down at us, shouting, "Repent." The whole church burst into flames. Luckily I escaped and was able to tell this tale, but no one believes me, even those that pretend they do. I know deep down they don't. Worst yet is I am being charged with arson for the church burning and the murders of everyone in it. Me and two of my friends, Sarah and Julie, were having a sleepover. My parents were out until around midnight. We were kind of bored, so I decided to us play a simple game called Bloody Mary. It was a local urban legend where if you looked into the mirror and say Bloody Mary 12 times, she will appear. That was about it really. I didn't really believe any of it would happen, but I wish we never ever played that game. Let me tell you why. We had decided to play it, and we were all standing in front of a mirror in the bathroom. We all said Bloody Mary 12 times. Bloody Mary, 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 Bloody Mary. We felt kinda creeped out, except nothing happened. But then we all jumped when the door behind us opened, and all I can remember was screams. I ran out the door and down the stairs and out of the house. I rang my parents and they came back home quickly. When my parents came back, they collected me from my neighbour's house where I was staying at. When we all walked into the house, the police were already there. But the worst part was two of my friends vanished into thin air. They were never found. Years later, I was getting ready to go out on a date when I got such a shock. I walked into my bathroom and saw written on blood or lipstick, I'm not sure, but it was written on the bathroom mirror, "Bloody Mary is watching you." I froze, wondering who would do such a sick joke. Suddenly I heard movement behind me, and there was a woman covered in blood jumped from me. I screamed in horror. Then she stuck a needle in my arm, and a few minutes later I came around while strapped to a chair. My mouth was gagged so I couldn't scream. Another girl walked in, covered in blood. I wished I never ever played that game Bloody Mary. And then I wouldn't be in my living room strapped to a chair. The woman began to speak. "Well, do you know who we are? We are your two friends who you abandoned years ago when you ran out of your house, and it was your idea to play that stupid game. We were kidnapped by some psycho who held us in his basement and treated us like animals, but thankfully we escaped, and now we are going to give you the punishment that you escaped all those years." My friends both held up a big knife, and I knew I was about to be killed, but suddenly I heard a noise in the background. A man appeared. I felt relief. The man must have heard the shouting and came to save me. Then my heart sank when I realized by the girl's reaction It was the madman who was keeping them captive. I am now in a dirty cold room where I don't know exactly where, but I hope someone picks up this letter, as I found a pen and paper hidden in the wall, maybe by other hostages. I am throwing this through the wall, so if you pick it up from the outside, through this hole that I throw it to, you will know exactly where I am. This hole in the wall could save my life. Lucky it is just big enough to me squeeze through this letter. If you do find this letter, please call the police and tell them, get me right away. This man is crazy, and it's only a matter of time before he kills me. He has already killed my friends for trying to escape. Please, please, someone help me. Sarah saw an ad in a local newspaper that a psychic was visiting her town. Gypsy Jane Doe. She always was very interested in psychics, but never got a chance to visit any. She used to remember her grandmother saying they were all charlatans. Sarah decided to visit the psychic the day she was in town. She was nervous the psychic was going to say something she didn't like, and something she would be very afraid of. When she was sitting down in front of Gypsy Jane Doe, she was nervous. There was like a weird energy in the room. The woman looked at her crystal ball and then put on a face as if she was after seeing a ghost. Sarah asked her what was wrong. The psychic looked up to her and said, I can see very bad things happen to you, or anyone who you are close to. Sarah said, what do you mean? The woman looked into her ball again and said, you or someone you love will be killed, and there will be a fire. A big fire. Sarah had enough of it and stood up and said, I've had enough. How much? The lady said, $5 will be fine. Sarah gave her the money and walked out of the room, worried about what she had just told her. As she was going out of the room, the woman called after her, be careful, child. What I saw in my crystal ball didn't seem good. The next day, Sarah was inside in her bedroom playing a computer game when she smelled smoke. She straight away thought of what the psychic said. She ran out of her room and down the stairs. She screamed when she saw her dad lying in blood on the ground. He must have been attacked. Then suddenly, when Sarah turned, she jumped with fright as she saw the psychic in the room. Sarah screamed, oh my God, you did this, you crazy old bat, you did this. Why? The psychic said in a bitter, angry voice. Because your stupid grandmother cost me so much money. I used to be on the pier in this town all summer long and used to make a great living until your grandmother stuck her snout in where it doesn't belong and started spreading rumours telling people I was a charlatan, that I had no psychic powers at all. Before long, everyone nearly stopped coming to see me. Only a few odd tourists that didn't hear the rumours, and before long they were gone. There would be no return visits. I ran out the door and called the police. They arrived and arrested the crazy woman. I couldn't believe how lucky I was that the fire she lit went out before it made the whole house go up in flames. I promised myself I would never again go visit a psychic. Me and my two friends stepped inside a haunted house, and the one thing I knew about this house was apparently there were some strict rules you needed to follow once inside. I had no idea what the rules were, but the house was just an ordinary house built in the 1900s. My two friends were Samuel and Connor, and we were all fans of haunted houses. The three of us smashed the front door and we were able to enter the abandoned haunted house. To be honest, the whole area was kind of abandoned. As soon as we stepped inside the house, we still didn't know what the rules were. Inside the abandoned house, it is exactly as you would expect an abandoned house to be. Distant from present times, even the atmosphere didn't want us inside. And then Connor shouted out to us because he had figured out what the rules were. You would think the rules were written on the walls or on some piece of paper, but when Connor showed us his arms, it had writing on it. When me and Samuel checked ourselves out, we too had writing on our body, which we didn't write, and it was the rules of the house. Connor on both his arms had the rule no talking written on his arms, and he couldn't talk anymore. Samuel on his feet had the rules no violence written on one of his feet, and I had something written on my neck which read no leaving for the three of you. And I guess we each had our own rule to follow. Connor couldn't speak anymore. Samuel couldn't do anything violent anymore, and when he tried to smash a window, he just couldn't. I tried leaving, but there was a new door which had replaced the old one we had broken to get into the house. Also, my rule written on my neck also affected the other two, while theirs didn't affect mine. Connor started to panic because he couldn't talk anymore, or whenever Connor tried shouting, but nothing would come out. Then Samuel had an idea. Because the rules were somehow written on our body, the only way to break them is by breaking the limb it's written on. Then I did something without asking Connor's permission and broke both his arms, and Connor managed to scream. He was angry and glad at the same time that I broke his arm and disproved Samuel's theory to be correct. Connor then broke Samuel's feet, the one where the rule was written on, and Samuel was able to act violent again. They were both in pain, but relieved, but none of us could get out of this house. You see, my rule, which was written on my neck, affected all three of us, and I know that there is only one way to break the rule. Samuel and Connor can break windows all they want and act violent, but a replacement would just appear as none of us could leave the house. The only way to break the rule is by snapping my neck. I declined all offers of snapping my neck, and there is no easy way to break someone's neck, as the fatality of death is too high. After many days inside this house, I am considering letting Samuel break my neck. Luckily, we brought ibuprofen to ease the pain which Samuel and Connor are experiencing, and some food as well. We are running out of food and pain medication, and the only way out is by snapping my neck to break the rule of not being able to leave this house. I have tried breaking my neck, but the rule seems to be a strong one. Jason was just home from work and turned on the baby monitor, smiling, looking at his wife and baby upstairs. He could still see how beautiful his wife looked, and still fell as in love with her today as much, if not more, as the day they met. It was love at first sight for him, so he tells her anyway. But whether it was love at first sight, it definitely is love now. He was about to walk upstairs to his wife and the baby when there was a knock on the door. He answered it and couldn't believe his eyes when his wife was standing at the door right in front of him. He felt a shiver run up his spine, wondering if his wife is standing at the door, then who is upstairs with his baby? Mary Jason's wife asked him what was wrong. He said, "I don't know what's happening or how, but I was just watching you on the baby monitor, and then you knocked on the door." Then suddenly Mary put on a face like she was just after seeing a ghost. I turned around and saw at the top of the stairs a woman that looked exactly like Mary. I felt a shiver run up my spine again. Suddenly, my wife ran up the stairs, shouting, "Get away from my baby, you maniac! Get away!" There was a fight between my wife and the woman, and suddenly my wife pushed the woman downstairs. She was dead on the impact of her head against the wall. My wife explained, "Jason, you know I love you, and you know that you mean everything to me, but that woman is my twin sister. I am so sorry to have to tell you this way, and I am so sorry I lied to you about my parents dying in a car crash. I feared you'd be turned off me if I said the truth. That's my twin sister. I know I told you. I never had any sisters, but I just didn't want any complications. My parents could never tell us apart. It made me sick we looked so alike. But we were so different. Even my parents could never tell us apart, except for a knife wound on her back that she got in a fight in high school. When she was a teenager, she got put into an asylum at 17 for murdering my parents, but last week she escaped. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this sooner, I really should have." We decided to go to the police, and thankfully my wife didn't get arrested after the police knew her twin sister's history. That night we were in bed, and I felt a strange feeling. I don't know why. Then, out of the light of the moon, I felt a shiver go up my spine as I saw on my wife's back a scar that I never saw before. Because there was no scar before. I then realized my wife was not lying next to me, but her twin sister was, who killed her parents and who killed my beloved wife. I froze in fear, wondering what to do next. Then I saw a knife rise, and I heard words mumble in a sleepy tone. "Are you awake?" Back in 1883, there were 5 prospectors, including a man called Alfred, travelled towards Gunnison in Colorado in the high hope of being lucky enough to find gold. The travellers found themselves with very low supplies, and to make matters worse, they were exposed to relentless freezing winter months. They tried their best to battle the freezing cold, but it turned out that their only option was cannibalism. This led to murder. Alfred was the sole survivor and was convicted on 4 counts of murder on Friday the 13th, April 1883. Packer's defense was that his fellow travelers had turned hostile towards him and he was forced to kill them, and the only reason he ate their bodies was out of necessity. Whether it was true cannibalism or out of bare necessity, Alfred was convicted on Friday the 13th. Nora was 12 years old and always was afraid of a monster hiding under her bed. She stopped looking only a few days ago because she was always afraid of looking into a monster's eyes. She used to tell people but stopped as she knew they would tell her that she shouldn't worry about such ridiculous things. Suddenly one night Nora was trying to get to sleep, but she was tossing and turning. She heard noises from under her bed and she decided to take a look. When she did, she saw her father that she had drugged a few days ago gone a very pale colour. It was now time to kill the monster she knew. Her father's eyes opened in horror as she got out a knife and slit his throat. Then she was relieved that the monster under her bed was dead. Weeks later, the body was found, and Nora was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the case took an unexpected twist. Years earlier, there were a whole family murdered by a little girl, and she was found crying, clutching onto a doll. Some people say the doll was possessed. One detective was surprised to learn the story because he remembered a doll in the room. When he went back to the room, he looked at the doll, but what happened next made him freeze in fear, as the doll wasn't the same doll he had seen. The doll was a miniature version of Nora. He thought it was some sick prank until her eyes blinked. Simon always, as long back as he can remember, always wanted to go to the St. Patrick's Day parade, but his drunk father never allowed him. His father used to stay at home all day drinking and getting drunk. Years later, when Simon was 8 and had the independence to go himself, he made the most of it and wanted to really make an impact on St. Patrick's Day and enjoyed it to the full. He designed shamrock hats at the tender age of 8, and for some reason they became a must-buy hat, and the shops couldn't have enough for the people that wanted to buy them. They were that popular. It was finally St. Patrick's Day, and he was really looking forward to finally enjoy St. Patrick's Day parade. He walked into the parade and enjoyed all the floats and was so happy seeing people wear his beloved shamrock hat. He knew that now was the time. After all, he was so lucky to be able to come across a witch one day on his travels through a fairy fort. He still didn't believe it until it happened. Then he said the words, "St. Patrick's Day, top of the morning to ya." They could be any words he chose, the witch said. It was all what was done during the ritual made it work. He looked around, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. But finally he could see some man next to him turn green, then his child. He smiled, knowing this was all happening. Within minutes there were more and more people turn green and turn into leprechauns, and within 20 minutes the whole parade was a bloodbath, with leprechauns killing each other by any means necessary. Simon smiled, knowing that finally he got payback for all those years his school friends and families were enjoying St. Patrick's Day.
My parents weren't happy with where we were living. We wanted a new start, so we moved to a new town called Maple Heights. It was a nice town. Most people were friendly. I moved here when I was 10. I met this same kid who lived on the same street as me. He seemed to be the same age as me, but I never saw him go to his house. We became best friends. We always hanged out and played at my house. One day, I asked him if we can go to his house today. He told me that's not a good idea because his grandma was sick. I asked about his parents and he started crying, so I never asked him about them again. It always crossed my mind of what happened to them and where they are to this day, but I didn't want to see him cry again, so I left it alone. It's now 8 years later and we have just graduated high school. I've never been the one to drink or throw parties, but my parents were out of town this week and my friend kept begging me. So I told him I'll throw a small get-together. I said it would just be me, him, and some of our close friends. He smiled and agreed. It came to that time when the party would come. I was only expecting a couple of people, but instead, a bunch of people came. I was getting pretty nervous because my parents were coming home the next day and everyone was drinking. Stuff was getting knocked down and the house was a mess. I got mad at my friend for inviting all of these people, and my friend told me that he wanted me to make more friends before he had to go. I was the kid who always did my schoolwork and never had any fun, so tonight I told him I would let loose if he helped me clean up before my parents got home. He agreed. I felt pressured to drink, so I tried it and then I started partying and drinking some more. Before I noticed, I was waking up and everyone was gone. I quickly looked at the time and realized that my parents were about to be home within 10 minutes. I started to panic because I still had the whole house to clean up. But when I checked the house, it was completely clean. I was so confused. I then found a letter from my friend telling me that he cleaned everything up and apologized that he had to go and that he would never see me again. I was very confused, so I tried calling him, but then I realized that he never had a phone. I then went to go visit the house my friend told me where he lived, but I was never allowed to go. I went over to the house, and it was a creepy looking house. I rang the doorbell, and no one answered. I saw that the door was open, so I went inside. The house was abandoned as if nobody has ever lived there. I heard some weird noises, so I ran out of the house. I came back home and decided to look up my friend on the internet and on all social medias. I came across an article of my friend and of his grandma. The article said missing 10-year-old boy who was never found. The article was from 8 years ago and was just recently updated. It said that the boy was never found. I said to myself, this is really weird. Then I looked at the date and it said 1847. I couldn't believe what I have just read. I asked my parents about that house and they said that a family of a 10-year-old boy, his grandma, and parents all were killed in the house. I asked my parents how. They said the boy killed his whole family, then went missing for 8 years.
Sam was so happy to have discovered from his dad a time travel machine. It was nothing fancy or big, just a watch. You set the time and press a button, and within seconds you whizzed either back in time or forward. He always was a big fan of JFK, but never got to see his inauguration speech, so was very happy to have a chance to travel back and see it and experience it in real life. He put in the time and date, and within seconds he couldn't believe it. He was actually standing in the middle of the crowd listening to John F. Kennedy give his inauguration speech.
Twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, north and south, east and west, that can assure a more fruitful life for all mankind? Will you join in that historic effort? In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
After that, he knew what else he wanted to experience, and that was walking on the moon, so he set the time and place to the rocket just before they took off. His experience was absolutely amazing. Sam felt like he was dreaming when he was actually hiding in the spaceship, ready to walk on the moon as soon as he had the chance. He knew they would be all in spacesuits and had his ready, so that would be also a good way to blend in and not be seen by the others. To be an outsider. Everything was going great until when Sam was walking on the moon. Somehow his time travel watch came off with a gust of air. He hadn't realized until then that it was the rocket taking off to go back to Earth. He watched his time travel watch float off to outer space as he floated the other way, knowing that he had no way of getting back to Earth and would starve to death floating in space.
I was over my friend's house, who I haven't seen in a while. We were bored, so I asked if he wanted to play hide and seek. He said sure. I told him that he can go hide first. He said okay, and I started counting. 3, 2, 1, ready or not, here I come, I said. I started to walk around the house. It was an old and creepy looking house. As I'm walking around the house looking for him, I notice a big picture frame that is crooked, so I go over to it to fix it. But then, it falls right over. But there was a secret entrance where the picture frame was that fell. My eyes were wide open, and I think, wow, this is amazing. He must be hiding in there. I enter in, and I just see a bed. It's a mess though, and it smells. But my friend isn't down here, so I went back to where the picture frame was, and I left, so I could continue to look for my friend. I walk further down the hallway, and I find my friend. "I see you," I said. He says, "Oh man, how did you find me?" I told him that I just saw him. As we're walking back, I told him that his secret room was pretty cool. He stops and looks at me very weirdly and says, "What weird room?" He seems to be so serious, so I laugh and tell him, "Your secret room behind the picture frame, silly duck." His face lit up as if he was frightened. At this point, I knew he wasn't kidding around. He says that we need to get to our parents. So we find my friend's parents, and my friend tells his parents of the secret room. They ask me where it is, so I go and show them it. They told me that this was never part of the house when they brought it, so they call the police. I then go home. I'm getting ready for bed, and right before bed, my friend calls me. He says that the police found out that there was someone living down there this whole time. I asked him who. He said they're not sure. The man was never caught, but someone was definitely living down there. I think to myself, maybe it's some homeless old man. But then my friend tells me that the person down there had knives and a picture of me and my friend from years ago. It's like he was going to try to kill us, and which means he's been living down there spying on us for the last couple of years. My face lit up in fright and wonder what would have happened to me if he was down there when I went down there while we were playing hide and seek.